off the rim and in! Oh! And the Thunder win!
Come on, let's sing the Thunder song.
When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your thunder buddy and say these magic words.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of a podcast with me.
Thunder Buddies podcast.
It's sort of the Thunder Buddies, the original Thunder Buddies.
The original Thunder Buddies.
I'm Darnell Mayberry, sort of your host. I don't really know why I'm hosting right now.
You are.
But Mike Sherman, sports editor, outgoing sports editor Mike Sherman.
For 2.5 more days.
Yep. And then we've got esteemed columnist Barry Tramel here to my right.
Shouldn't you be doing this podcast from the Hamptons? Isn't that how people leave town? Don't they go
Shots
via the
fired.
Hamptons?
Shots fired.
First of many.
So we convened on this very lovely Wednesday afternoon because we have just passed the 10-year anniversary of the Hornets being in town, the NBA in OKC last fall, and we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the purchase of the Seattle SuperSonics by the professional basketball club, Clay Bennett and his cronies. When is that anniversary, Mike?
Monday.
It's Monday, and Barry's writing about it for Sunday. He's doing a package on that for Sunday. Of course, Darnell, we did that. You led that package we did back in August last year, and now here 12 months later we're looking at it. And, you know, this is a little bit about reader request. One of your best readers, one of the people that admires your coverage, Barry, and your coverage, Darnell, most is Steve Lackmeyer, Mr. OKC Central. And Slackmeyer told me shortly after it came let it be known that I was leaving to go be sports editor of the Tampa Bay Times, that we should do this. And what he said was that you guys should do a podcast to talk about the early days of the NBA here, especially with everything sort of in flux. At that point, Steve did not know Kevin Durant was leaving. At that point, he didn't know that the talk of Vegas would be possibility of Russell Westbrook trade. How unsettling all this has been to Oklahoma City. He wanted us to talk about those days. So that's why I'm just trying to make Lackmeyer happy. So
There's a lot of good memories that came.
You went to Seattle.
A couple times, a couple different times. And I went to New York City for the Board of Governors vote. It was crazy times, just memories that you think back on when all of this was coming into focus, the NBA and OKC, big league city, the March 4th vote, Mick Cornett leading the charge, all of these things that helped us get to where we are today as a NBA city. It's really phenomenal when you think back on it.
Well, and so here's a suggestion. Let's just throw out stuff we remember and tell stories about them. And I'll tell one.
You start.
I'll start here. Barry, Carter Strickland left.
Uh-oh.
Carter Strickland.
Left.
Famed OU writer.
I think I know where he's going with this.
Famed OU writer. And so he left to go. He was here for like 5 minutes. 9 months, I think it was. Maybe a little bit longer.
Whatever.
But anyway, we hired him. He was a Washington State beat writer for a Spokane paper. And we hired him to cover OU. And he was here long enough to knock on Larry Koshell's door after Larry Koshell said those things and got boosted out at OU. Anyway, then he left. He went to the AJC. Actually, he left in the summer. I remember it. And so we were looking for somebody to cover. We're going to move things around on the college football beat, so we were looking for somebody to ultimately what we thought was we moved John Helsley to the OU beat, work with George. And we were looking for an Oklahoma State football writer. And I was in 2003. Right after I became sports editor, there was a young man that walked up to me at a AP Sports Editors Conference in Dallas. And we were giving away hats that said, "Sports is our turf." Remember, sports is our turf?
Sports is our turf. I remember.
And so we were giving away these hats, and at the George Solomon was being honored as the Red Smith Award winner that year, former Washington Post sports editor. And they said at the end of that thing, they said, right after lunch, just want to remind you, the guys from the Oklahoman had helped be a sponsor of that APSE meeting in Dallas and said, they got some stuff to give away. Go see them. They're in the back. Me, Bill Boots, and Mike Kaler were there, and we were handing out these hats. And a young man approached me, and said, "Hey, can I get one of those hats?" I said, "Absolutely." Who are you? He says, "Well, I happen to be from Oklahoma City. Went to Bishop McGinnis. Young man by the name of Darnell Mayberry.
I was just trying to get a free hat.
Just trying to get a free hat." Anyway, we talked. I don't remember it being a long conversation, but I remember the conversation. And I remember thinking, let's file this name away. At the time, he was, I think, interning at Newport News. Is that right, Darnell? Do I have my facts straight, or was it?
Yeah. Oh, not yet. Not yet. That was 2003. I think I was a junior in college. And I was on my way to an internship in Columbus, Georgia, the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer.
Okay. So then, and right after that, we had then he came by and said, "Hey, I'm going to be." So we stayed in touch. Said he's going to be in town for a wedding or something, and we saw him at that. We talked to him. Kept looking for ways to hire him. We ended up with a part-time job one time, and tried to talk him into that. And didn't you have an internship with the New York Times?
No, I had a 2-week journalism institute, that was sponsored by the New York Times.
Okay.
But never with the New York
So
Times.
anyway, you had that, and then a job offer at Akron, I believe.
Yep.
And so all I had was part-time job. I was trying to, hey, how about this? How about that? And kept trying to talk to him about this, how about that? But then when Carter Strickland left,
He was in Akron.
and it was I will say this now. We interviewed one person for that job. And he wasn't an easy person to talk into taking that job, because I offered him the Oklahoma State football job. I was in that meeting room up on the 8th floor, pacing around in circles, trying to convince Darnell to take the Oklahoma State job, even though he came here to interview, even though the interview went really well. He kept reminding me that, "But Mike, you already have an Oklahoma State beat writer." And I said, Barry, I said to him, "Yeah, but he's moving to the OU beat." And Darnell was like, "But I don't, but you haven't." It was, do you remember that, Darnell?
Vividly.
You were being obstinate?
Very. The man had someone in the position. I wasn't about to move halfway across the country, even though I was from here,
Well, you didn't
for a
accept,
job that didn't exist.
You didn't accept his explanation
No.
of what was going to happen?
No, he did not.
There
Let me
seemed to
just
be
say
a
this.
lack of trust.
Let me say this. He might also embellished a little bit on that explanation. I don't think it was quite explained to me then the way he just explained
Well,
it.
if he started off with Carter Strickland, I can understand why you were confused. So
Well,
I mean,
okay, so he doesn't like my storytelling, but here's what I remember, and I'll get to this right finally. That was Darnell came here the day the levees broke. In fact, the day the levees broke, after Katrina.
Is that right?
Yeah, we were at the.
It's close. That's
we
close.
went. We
It's really
took him.
close.
We took him to a Red Hawks game, and the Zephyrs were in town. It was me and Jenny and the K-Man, and took Darnell to the game that night. Next morning, he flies out, and I took him to the airport, and we left.
Oh, you mean that was his
for the interview.
For the interview.
For the interview, he came
so
in.
he interviewed during
when
the
the levees broke. Yeah,
I took him to Stillwater
Yeah, you did.
during the interview.
Well, which, by the way, that's what.
And we stopped and had a snow cone right there on 6th Street.
Well,
That's right.
And that's the kind of place that you send somebody, you take him to Stillwater, because he's going to be the Oklahoma State football
Well, there you
writer.
go.
So anyway,
I haven't had enough snow cones in the 10 years since.
well, you never can have too many snow cones. But the story really is that between the time Darnell interviewed and the time he took the job, he finally did accept the job.
Yep.
He-
Thank God I did.
He was the Oklahoma State football beat writer for about a week. Accepted the job, was going to be hired.
He
Except
was.
I never had a byline on Oklahoma
Never had a
State.
byline.
Well,
But he did something on Oklahoma State, something fairly momentous. He was behind the camera filming the rant. It's a true fact.
He went from the rant to Durant.
To rant. That's right. But anyway, the big thing was between the time that I offered him the job and the time he took it, the job changed because an NBA team fell out of the sky. And I got to call him up, one of my favorite phone calls I've ever made in my life, not just this job, in my life. Because Darnell had said, I want to be an NBA beat writer. That's my dream. I want to be my NBA beat writer. It's very seldom you get to call somebody up and say, hey, you know that
Here's your
dream of
dream.
yours? I want to make it come true.
That's
That
cool
happened.
beans.
Also, a story I do not remember.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I remember sitting at Red Lobster with my girlfriend at the time.
in Akron.
Yeah, it was Cleveland or Akron, one of those. But
I like Red Lobster. What a good place.
I
that is.
remember Mike Kaler calling me.
The K-Man.
I don't remember you calling me with that.
The closer, we called him.
Oh,
Well, listen, that
but if you say it happened that way, I'm sure it
happened.
happened that way.
Yeah,
But I remember Mike Kaler calling me at Red Lobster, and I looked at my girlfriend at the time and said, "Holy crap, I'm going to be covering the NBA."
Yeah. Well, let me say this. It was me, and I promise you this. When I get to do something that much fun, I'm not letting somebody else do it. and then came the NBA. Except there's a couple things. One, you didn't get here in time. You were not here.
I missed the press conference.
You missed the press conference. You were not here the day we met Willis Reed. He was
RFD was not here the day Willis Reed came to town?
Was not.
I was here the day, and you guys make fun of me to this day about it. My first day on the job, the season ticket event, Chris Paul and his brother CJ were on the floor greeting the fans as they walked in to select their seat for season tickets. To this day, I love Chris Paul. Probably because of that. He was the first guy I met on the job.
Not allowed to talk about Chris Paul.
Nope.
But he, you know what else Darnell's famous for? Saving us, saving our chili. Because this was all new to us. A couple things happened. One, we got to hire him. We decided instead of, against some people on our staff's advice, remember, Barry, they wanted us to let the Times-Picayune cover the Hornets for us. There was a suggestion.
By who?
I shouldn't name them.
Names.
I shouldn't name them.
Table of Truth, right here.
Right here. You're leaving. What do you care?
Rhodey. Rhodey thought it'd be a good idea if we had the Times-Picayune. So they got people covering them. The day that the team, the day that Lackmeyer wrote the story, and this is why Lackmeyer wanted to do the podcast, so I would tell the story about him breaking it. But he did. Andrew Gilman was walking through the newsroom on a Friday before a high school football, Friday or Thursday, I can't remember which. I think it's Friday. And said, hey, just heard Sporting News Radio say that Nashville, Anaheim, Oklahoma City are in the running, or Louisville are in the running to be a temporary home to the Hornets because they don't have a place to play because of Katrina. And it had a ring of truth. They're in the Southwest Conference. We just looked at the Interstate 35 and thought, hey, look at this. And on that Saturday, we had a heck of a report. I remember we had a bunch of stuff. Barry had a column. Rhodey had a story. Lackmeyer had a story. We just went at it. And I think it was a week later, we broke the story, and Lackmeyer had me, we were sort of uncertain about the particulars. And so I had to call Jimmy Smith. And Jimmy was covering the team for the Picayune with John Reed. They had two people on it. And I was trying to see what they knew about it. I called Jimmy Smith, and I'll never forget it. He said, you're going to have to, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. My house is underwater. I felt pretty bad about making that phone call. And then the next day, I got to call Darnell and say, we're going to have a team. But in the interim, we were just making it up. We decided to, and we threw, I remember Ed Kelly said something to me as an aside. Ed Kelly, at the time, the editor of the paper at the time, the biggest NBA fan I knew, he was at that seating. He was there. He's from front row, front of the line to buy seats. He said, how the Oklahoman covers this will go a long way of determining how people see Oklahoma City as a big league city. And I said, well, I'm not going to let you down. We won't let you down. And ever since then, great source of pride that how much the paper has invested in it and how much you guys have invested in that coverage. 2 beat writers, no fewer than 2 people at every Thunder game.
Yep.
Most of the time, 3. Playoff games, 4 and sometimes 5. Story every day. I mean, every day.
Story and notes.
From late September until
Summer League.
Until sometime in July, usually.
Sometime in July, yeah. And that's a credit to you guys. But the great thing was the key to it all was really the first hire, and that was you.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't agree with it, but I appreciate it. Barry, what were your early memories of the NBA and OKC?
Well, I'll go back to the 10-year anniversary of what we're talking about. I remember the day they bought the team. Yeah. And here's when I knew it was a big deal. I was working in Norman in terms of my radio. I had a radio show in Norman at that time. I started out at the Ref.
The writer's block.
Then I went to the Animal. Then I went back to the Ref, and then back to the Animal. I went back to the Animal for good in 07. But in 06, I was at the Ref doing 4 to 7, I think. And I went down there, and the news broke during the day about Clay and the guys buying the team, so I worked on it a good part of the day. And they got me on the phone with Clay. And so I got down there, and from 4 to 5 back then, I was on with Myron Patton. So we did the show together from 4 to 5. And then from 5 to 7, I was by myself. And I remember getting there saying, guys, I might have to bolt early, or I might have to come in late. I just don't know, because I got a phone call about 4 o'clock our time that said, hey, we're going to get you on the phone with the commissioner here in about 30 minutes. And so sitting in the lobby of the Ref there on Alameda Street in Norman, I got a call from David Stern. And that's when I knew this was a big deal. That's when I knew this is serious business, because it's clear now Stern's whole operation was, and remember the famous quote from a year earlier or so when Seattle just basically said, we're not doing an arena deal, and Stern responded by saying, it's pretty clear you're not interested in the NBA, or something like that. And that's when we said, man, this is a team that could move. And then Clay buys them in the summer of 06. And I thought, wow, he might move them here. And then Stern calls me. It was clear that Stern was totally in support of this. And if this team moved to Oklahoma City, David Stern was fine with it. That's what I took from that phone call. And that's when I got serious about the notion that the Seattle SuperSonics might come here.
You know what I remember about that day?
Can I pop Barry first
Pop him.
before you say that?
Pop him.
So you got serious about that. So did you lose your interest in the Hornets at that point? Because for a while there, you wrote that column saying Hornets aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, but the day Clay bought the Sonics.
Is that when it
Tell
all
that
changed
story.
for you?
It turned all the way around.
Well, do you remember the famous
oh,
quote?
yeah.
Tell your favorite
Was that
quote.
the day of?
No, here's
or,
what.
or that was earlier in the spring. Yeah, in the spring,
They had
there were some rumors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Clay was in
Clay. That's when he formed the ownership group that
Right.
said, "I want to buy an NBA team and bring it to Oklahoma City." And that's when I asked
George.
our man George Shin, owner of the Hornets. I said, "George, did you hear about Clay?" He said, "Oh yeah, a little bit. What's going on?" I said, "Well, Clay's formed this ownership group with the stated purpose of bringing a team to town. What do you think of that?" And he said, "I just don't think Oklahoma City's big enough for 2 franchises." So, but the day Clay, in fact, my column the next day, I think, the day after Clay bought the Sonics was, this is a stunning development. Here's what this means. The Hornets are going back to New Orleans, and the Sonics will eventually be in Oklahoma City. So, it just proves that every once in a while I get it right, because that's exactly what happened.
No car parking. There was no car parking promises or declarations in that. I mean, he didn't say, if that doesn't happen, I'm going to come to Seattle and park cars.
Will you ever go to New Orleans and park cars, Barry?
I'll go park cars if somebody wants me to. I don't see any spaces personally when I go.
Parking's terrible down in French Quarter. It's bad. But that, of course, that's a reference to Barry's declaration that if the Hornets ever go back, I'll park cars at opening night. It wasn't that what you said?
Something like that. But here's the deal: that when Clay got off the Hornet Express and said, "Hey, we're looking elsewhere," that changed things. And when he bought the Sonics, that pretty much,
get out of parking free card.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Let me
right.
tell you how different of a day that was. One of those trips I made to Seattle,
Muckleshoots.
I had an exclusive interview with Clay Bennett. That might have been one of the last interviews he's done. I sat down in a hotel room somewhere and had an exclusive interview one-on-one with Clay Bennett.
How many times did you go up there?
I think twice. I remember being there for a game.
Didn't we send Chris Castile to cover the trial?
Yes, we did.
Our Washington correspondent.
Man, there was all kinds of stuff in there. I mean, this was a hairy thing for the Oklahoman to cover. First of all, we were dispatching people all over the place. Second of all, we were going up and trying to figure out what the lay of the land was. I remember K-Man said that the arena that Clay had requested from the, Seattle was equivalent to like the Star Wars city of Bespin. In fact, what Clay was asking for was an arena that would hover on top of the land.
Of the Puget Sound?
Of the Puget Sound, yeah. And that it was, just so extravagant, and there was no place to put it. So there came the Muckleshoots. Remember the Indian tribe?
Muckleshoots.
The Indian tribe that was going to, give up the land, and they had a racetrack, and you went out there and looked at the racetrack. There was all kinds of stuff. And then, but Barry, the other thing that happened that day, it was that day or the next day, is that you and me and maybe Jenny, I can't remember if Darnell was there, maybe Rhodey, we were sitting in the conference room on the 8th floor with a conference call that included Clay Bennett and Howard Schultz. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You remember we had
Yeah.
Howard Schultz explaining why he sold the team.
And explaining the process. I still defend Clay to this day because part of the contract was you got a year. Seattle has a year to negotiate with Clay in good faith on both parts to build an arena. And after a year, then he's free to market elsewhere.
Howard Schultz is the Benedict Arnold in all this for Seattle. I mean,
Yeah.
Mr. Coffey's
no kidding.
He's the one who said in that meeting that they didn't listen to me, and maybe this will give them the clear.
Maybe this will be the
galvanizing
maybe
event.
this will charge him into doing something.
Yeah. So we sat there and listened to Howard, and when it was all done, I remember thinking Barry wrote the column. I wonder if that was the same day, though. I wonder if you came up, because I do remember us all being in there, and then about a year later, we made it. Remember the headline?
That was in.
Was that 2 or is that 2 years later? It was 2 years.
It was 08.
Oh wait, yeah, that's 2 years later.
Yeah, we had
in the summer.
What we did is they had the agreement in March. Is in March, late March, because I was in an NCAA basketball tournament in Des Moines, and drove in. They had the big announcement at the Skirvin, like at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and we got up early in Des Moines and made it home for that.
Yeah, and
then they got here in June or July, whatever it was.
June, July. Now, so we celebrated the NBA and OKC last year or last fall, August. Anyway, what we're talking about now is a story about the arrival or the purchase of the team. I remember how politically difficult that was. Darnell, you remember going out and talking to Chris Paul that summer? That summer, Chris Paul had a basketball camp at Chesapeake, and you went out there to cover it.
The summer after the Hornets' first
year?
year?
No, the summer of the summer after 10 years ago. The team had been purchased, but and you went out and talked to Chris Paul, and Aubrey McClendon said to you,
"Oh, yeah, that wasn't at his camp. That was at Chesapeake, the thing that they do for their interns or young employees."
And Chris Paul was there,
Chris Paul was there addressing the staffers. And Aubrey McClendon said, point blank, into a tape recorder, "We didn't buy the team to keep it in Seattle. We bought the team to move it to Oklahoma City."
Yep. And that was sensitive stuff.
Sensitive stuff that, for whatever reason, we made the decision not to run. But the Business Journal did. The
Journal Record?
The Journal Record did. And it cost them 250 big ones, thousand. The NBA fined them for that comment. But that was a clear show of, to Seattle, what Clay Bennett and his group's intentions were. And, to this day, they obviously have resentment toward this ownership group because of that. And then, obviously, after that, the emails came out in the trial, and you got all of those forms of evidence that the team was not purchased to stay in Seattle. And it looked bad. Like you said, there was a lot of controversial things that were happening back then with emails going on and statements being made. And
there's no good way to move a team. And there's no good way.
No, you're right.
There's no good way to move a team. Having been
you know what? As an aside to that, it's just like this Kevin Durant stuff. There's no great way for a guy to leave a city either, I don't think.
No.
Not of that caliber, no.
No, and in a way, I remember seeing Clay, in all the press conferences in Seattle, you know, as chairman of the ownership group, he sort of got cast in the role of a villain. In other words, there had to be a villain in this, and sort of somebody with the jaw to take a punch. And I'll give it to Clay. He can take a punch. He took plenty of them. He's a hero in his hometown and a villain. But
you know what's
Seattle.
interesting though? All those punches he took has changed him in terms of, you know, RFD talking about a sit down with Clay. When I see him like at a function, particularly if it's a non-Thunder, like not a game or something. See him down at OU
football game. Yeah.
OU. I saw him at a Regents deal one day. We had a great conversation. Couldn't have been better. It was after Brooks was fired, and he didn't give me any quotes for publication, but he would sit there and chatted and was, you know, really fun to talk to, and it was good. But man, otherwise, he's not interested in the public spotlight.
Yeah, and
You got to pull teeth. I've talked to him on the record, once in 3 years, and I'm way ahead of the game. So he's gone into a shell, and part of that is all those punches he took in Seattle.
he took a bunch of them. But here's the thing. If you're going to move a team, somebody's got to take that. Somebody's got to be the front man that does it.
Art Modell,
Walter
O'Malley.
Robert Irsay. Bud Adams. Somebody's got to be the villain. It doesn't happen without that. And you're right, Barry. Remember when he was a Pioneer partner, when he was one of the guys that were making George Shinn and the Hornets whole, he was just front and center, and you could talk to him about the NBA, and he was just, you know, all those guys, there was just this euphoria about it. I think he was even interviewed on the floor at the Ford Center when the story, I think he even sat on a stool right there at the Ford Center and did an interview when the story broke that there was an interest in buying the Sonics. Now think of that for a second.
It's really sad because to this day he still walks around with a bodyguard, security. And
His
he
life
probably
changed.
has to because, he was receiving death threats in Seattle. And as you see, when Kevin Durant left, the people of Seattle, they had a columnist in Seattle write a column about, join the club, Oklahoma City. Now you see how it feels. There's still so much resentment and bitterness toward Clay Bennett and the Thunder in Seattle that, Clay Bennett probably still fears for his life, literally.
And and what put us in a difficult position, and I go back to, I remember when Barry wrote a column that said that George Shinn had a handshake deal to sell the team to local investors. I believe that column the day it was written. I believe that it happened. I believe George woke up the next morning and saw his son and changed his mind, backed out on it. But folks in New Orleans thought that we were part of the effort to steal the team. Well, we were part of the effort is to serve our readers. And our readers, going back to all this, was fanatically, they've been fanatics for this idea since the start. 12,000 tickets sold one night at Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club. You showed up, the line of people to get season tickets. Baldwin always described it as buying Girl Scout cookies, civic Girl Scout cookies. Carmelo Anthony, the first scrimmage. Not scrimmage.
Preseason
game.
Exhibition. You were close.
Exhibition.
Denver Nuggets.
You weren't far
Ronnie
off.
Dunn going through all the NBA rules with us.
Ronnie Nunn. Yeah.
Ronnie Nunn. Ronnie Nunn.
Enough. You're all over.
Sorry. Okay. All right, but remember Carmelo Anthony? He said, "Do these guys know that this is preseason game?"
Yeah.
It was full. We were responding to our readers. However, here's a good story to tell. My first breakfast with Sam Presti. I met Sam Presti that summer. So after they'd bought the team, after they'd moved him here, after all that stuff, Sam was meeting some of us. He probably met you guys before he did me, but he and I met at a Starbucks up by Oklahoma Christian. And just kind of a get-to-know-you thing. And first time I met him, seemed like a really nice guy. And he more or less, he wanted to know what questions I had. He asked me some, asked him about our people and that kind of thing. And he sort of asked me what my questions were. And I said to him, in what seems like a very quaint thing to say now, I said, Sam, do you realize how popular the Hornets were here? You know, people really loved Chris Paul, and they're going to miss him. You know, how does that, when you hear that, what does that make you feel? Because he says, you know, I actually think they're going to like Kevin Durant quite a bit too. He didn't pat me on my head, but he might as well have.
A guy who's probably, 15 years younger than you?
Yeah, that's kind of naive. And, of course, but that reflects really how crazy Oklahoma City was over the Hornets. And those early days of the Thunder, P.J. Carlesimo, media day at the Skirvin Hotel before it got remade.
Well, it was remade. But
Was it?
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's closed before.
Yeah, it was open, but I don't think it was all in all the Skirvin splendor it was.
Probably not.
And it was sort of a messed up deal. And there's Robert Swift and Johan Petro and Mo Sané. And
That was a bad team.
what a bad team. And do you guys remember this? The couple things happened. The first night, okay, I bought season tickets. I was at that season ticket deal with you for the Hornets because we bought some. And then we stayed in it. We moved down and bought season tickets we shared them with my brother-in-law. And I wanted the kids to get to go to some games. And so we ended up with about 8, 10 tickets. I forget what it was. Maybe, yeah, about 10 tickets. And we had this draft. And so we got opening night. They were playing the Bucks.
The Milwaukees. That's what
The
we call
Milwaukee Bucks. And they're playing them. And so I got the kids there early, dropped them off, and went down and hockey coached you guys. And so I was down there talking to Al Eschbach in the media
Now,
room.
there's an upset.
Al Eschbach was at opening night. I was talking to Al, and we ended up being in this big discussion. Heck, and I'll tell you this, Al likes reading the newspaper. He's not as big a fan of the paper as Jim Traber is, but he's a fan of the paper. And he was just praising you guys. The problem was my oldest son, Brooks, who was there with his sister, Lucille, he had been picked to be a ball boy, to bring out on the very first night. And when I'm finished with this story, my Dad of the Year nominations are going to, I might be honorable mention sometime, but nothing else. Brooks had to be in a certain place in order to carry out, be picked as the ball boy, the presenter of the basketball to Kevin Durant and whomever it was, Earl Watson for all I know. And I forgot.
You forgot.
I didn't get him. And Brooks was out there chasing autographs. Lucille was out there with him too.
It's outrageous.
I didn't get there in time, and guess what? Brooks did not get to be. The very first night, he didn't get to present the basketball. However, at the end of that year, on the end of a sort of a dreary year, but the players wanted to show their appreciation to the fans. And I was at that game, and we drew the lottery so that in our season ticket group we could get the last game. I forget who it was. I think Denver. I want to say Denver. And I was headed underneath the interview room. Players were headed off the court. So I was walking behind Kevin Durant as he walked back, trying to go to the locker room. As I was passing him to go to the interview room, I saw Kevin sit down on a chair and unlace his sneakers. One of those chairs that the security people sit on. And he turns around with his shoes in his hand and goes back out to the crowd. Well, I was underneath. I didn't know, but here's what happened. So Lucille, who is now an intern here at the Oklahoman.
Your daughter?
My daughter, Lucille. She's an intern here, and Brooks is 17, but they were little kids then. And Brooks had gotten autographs. He went to these games and got all these crazy autographs. I think he got Kevin's autograph 25 times. And he actually thought that him and Kevin knew each other because Brooks was the kind of kid that was hard to forget in those days. He painted his face and did all kinds of stuff. So anyway, here comes Kevin Durant walking back out towards the crowd. And Brooks wanted to stay and just give Kevin a high five one more time. And Lucille was going, Brooks, you're embarrassing me. Come on, let's leave. It's time to go. You're embarrassing me. Kept holding up a hand, high five. Here comes Kevin walking towards Brooks. He's beaming. He's going to get high five. And Lucille says, Brooks, you're embarrassing me. Stop. About that time, Kevin walks up to Brooks. And Brooks, the way Brooks tells it, he knew him by name. He handed him the shoes and said, here, Brooks.
Both shoes?
Both shoes. Brooks, beaming, turns around, holds them up to Lucille. Lucille looks at Brooks and says, can I have one? All that. Brooks has those shoes autographed by Kevin. He took them back in a year or so later and got them autographed by Kevin. To Brooks, Kevin Durant. I will say this. Several times in the lead up to the big decision, Brooks was asking me if he thought he should sell the shoes. And I said, I don't think so. I think you need to keep them.
Do they say to Brooks?
To Brooks.
Oh, you got to keep them.
You got to keep them.
It's still Kevin
He
Durant.
signed him?
He signed them.
It's still Kevin Durant. Doesn't matter who he plays for. If it says to Brooks, Kevin Durant, that's a collector's item.
Brooks is he's a high school. He's going to be a senior this year, and he's a guy looking for money. He's shaking out, scavenging for coins to go to movies and things like that. So, but he's not going to be able to sell those shoes. First of
Unless
all,
he finds another guy named Brooks.
yeah, that's right. Brooks and Dunn. Well, there's bunches of them out there. Brooks Robinson. But anyway, that's one of the stories I remember on the personal side of it. Our families like to go to the games too. Trish was at the game with Barry the night they fired P.J. Carlesimo.
Yeah, it was. We went as fans. We've gone as fans 2 or 3 times in 10 years. And we went. They played the New Orleanses on a Friday night, the day before the jump around OU Tech game of 2008.
Wow.
And they fired the snot out of P.J. Carlesimo.
That was the night.
Didn't let him get on a plane.
No, he did not get on a plane. That was against the Clippers, I think, wasn't it? It was a Friday night game against the
When they
Clippers.
fired him,
against
New
New Orleans.
Orleans.
New Orleans. No, I'm
New
sorry.
Orleans Friday, and then to go down to New Orleans play
Played
the
them
next
again.
night.
That was the night that Chris Paul cussed out Hilton Armstrong because he didn't box out.
Oh, yeah.
Box out. And then Desmond Mason or somebody got a tip and put it back in, and Chris Paul said, blankety, blankety, blank, I told you to blankety, blank,
Yeah.
box out.
I covered the NBA 2 years with the Hornets, and how many years the Thunder been here now? 8?
Yeah.
So the first 7 years of the Thunder. And the amazing thing is I've only been to one NBA game here as a fan in 10 years of the NBA being in town.
Really?
One. It came last November against the Brooklyn Nets. A buddy from church had season tickets or partial plan, and he invited me to a game. And, we moved downtown last year, and our office is now 2 blocks from the arena. So I said, hey, I'm here. I might as well. I'll just walk over to the arena, after I get off. And, boy, was it a different experience. And not necessarily in a good way. We sit, fortunately, courtside, covering games.
Where'd he sit?
My friend's season tickets, 3 rows from the top.
Ooh.
And I'm not exaggerating. 3 rows from the top. A much different experience. He asked me, so when you covered the team, where'd you sit? And I was a little bit embarrassed to tell him. I was a little embarrassed to say, you see all those people down there, you see the referee where he's standing? Right there. So it's something that I wish I got to experience more.
No, you don't.
Well, I mean, it's a different feel.
It's a different feel.
I wanted to go watch the Wizards. I think a lot of people know I'm a Wizards fan. I wanted to go watch the Wizards this past season when they came, but I had another commitment that night, and I couldn't do it. So that's one thing that I wouldn't call it a regret, but it's one thing that I never really got to experience, being so close to it, having to cover it all this time. I never got to experience it as a fan.
Rapid fire. First
We got to
one-
talk about one thing before we get out of here. Go with your rapid fire.
Here's I used to see all the games from those perspectives. Me and my son would just grab any ticket we could get, especially the first year of the Thunder, and you could get Loud City tickets pretty quick. And so I'd be up there watching, and I would be texting you about my perspective on the game. Remember the days when I used to literally hockey coach you guys?
Oh, yeah.
We should write about this. We should write about this. No. So here I was sitting up in Loud City, texting Darnell, who was sitting down at the courtside seats. Hey, what about this? Don't forget about this. What about this? Salim Stoudemire lighting them up.
It happened home and away.
Home and away. Watch the games.
He almost forced me to tears in the Miami Heat press room one day.
What was it?
During the finals?
No. This was long before that. He was hockey coaching me from Oklahoma City, from 1,000 miles away.
Watching the game.
We just had a difference of opinion on what the angle should be, and we got into it as we often did back then. And I was a young reporter, and I thought, and you were right. To your credit, you were right. I wanted to write about 3-pointers or something, how that shape the game, and you said no, you got to write about how Dwayne Wade took over the game, something like that. But we went back and forth just like we did when you had this OSU opening that wasn't really an opening, and that's just sort of what our relationship was.
Actually, it was an opening. But so there was one thing, and by the way, this is my way of repenting over it. I'm repenting. And what I came to see over time was how good you were at this and how good everybody was at this. And if you'll notice, I think I did better as the years went on. I was a lot less strident in my opinions about what we should do and had a lot less of them because I trusted you guys. However, true or false, Darnell? This is true or false?
False.
Wizards.
Okay, what about 'em?
Hornets.
Yeah. I did
David
not
West
run onto
shot.
the court. Do not try to tell people I ran onto the court.
You didn't run on the court. You ran across. You ran around the court, waving your arms, saying that shot should not count. True or false?
False.
Barry.
I'm going to say false. You're leaving. He's staying. I got to work with him.
You're talking about Wizards.
I did jump out of my seat, but there was no running across
Should
the
not
court.
count.
No.
That's before they spun it around, isn't it? They did not.
Oh
spin
yeah,
it
they didn't review. No, they did not review.
Great moments in the history. Our trip to here's my favorite. Yeah, we got to get to that. Okay, we got to get to that. My favorite was our Jenny walks in for Game 1 of the NBA Finals. He walks in on Game 1 of the NBA Finals, and she walks in and says, "Guess what? I'm going to the hospital tonight.
Hospital tonight.
Not going to be there to.
Not going to be there.
And now it's game on.
She was great with child.
She was.
You might tell people.
Yep, she did. Millie was born. Millie was born between Game 1 and Game 2.
June 13th, 2012.
Of the NBA Finals, and I got to. Of course, I was already going on the road. Remember, we went to Seattle. We went to San Antonio for the Western Conference Finals that year. I went with you guys, and then we went to Miami. We'll always have Miami, gentlemen.
That was cool beans.
Barry found us. You and Rhodey went off and stayed somewhere else on your own. That happened. And later you joined us.
Yeah.
But Barry found us a Marriott property.
Courtyard.
The
old Cadillac Hotel.
On the beach.
On the beach.
At Miami.
For a decent price.
For a decent price. Me, the Dish, Damon.
Johnny Damon, the late, great Johnny Damon.
Late, great Johnny and Barry.
Well, we had a photog, didn't we? Wasn't
the burden which stuff beset
Was the
us.
burden with us or Nate?
No, it was him. And we went down there, and then you came over and joined us.
Also known as Brian Terry.
Brian Terry. And it was just a great set. We went to, had great dinners. We had this weird dinner one time at this Art Deco place. Was trying to close. What was the name of the seafood place you love to go down in Miami?
Joe's Stone Crab.
Joe's Stone Crab. We had dinner there.
Big time dinner there.
It was a big time dinner. We tried to eat there the night before, but it was closed. We found out it was closed. So we went to some Art Deco place, dimly lit, cafeteria, Formica top counters, and a bunch of Swedish models and all kinds of South Beach people. But we had a great time there. I always remember that. Always remember traveling with you guys to San Antonio and the great meals we had. We took 2 card trips down in 2012 for the Western Conference Finals. Went down there, me, you, and Nate, and Damon one time, and Brian Terry. It was great stuff. And then the other thing is I remember is so many of the conversations we had while you guys were in your mobile newsroom. People don't really understand how we had to go to these games. I mean, you're driving to Memphis. You're driving to
San Antonio.
You're driving to
Now,
Dallas.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to think that I don't want it to come across as hard labor or we're put upon. It's the better way to go. There aren't any direct flights to some of these places, and the time spent from when you leave your house to the time you get to the hotel is just as quick taking a car as it is going to the airport, waiting on a flight, flying to Dallas or some such place, changing planes, getting on another flight, going to the airport, renting a car, then going to the airport. You don't end up saving any time. And you got 2 great benefits, or 3, really. One is you can work on the road. You can't work in an airplane very easy. You can work in a car pretty easy. Two, you're on your own schedule. If you want to leave at 8 o'clock the morning you're coming home, you can do it. If you want to leave at 10, you can do it. Whatever you want to do. And three, it's great for camaraderie.
And that is the thing that I remember. That's the thing I remember most. You had to have it. First of all, in order to do it, you really needed to have camaraderie. And Barry's the captain he's the morale officer of the good ship, the Oklahoman Sports. Always has been, always will be. It's just so much fun to travel with you guys. And for us, the guys here in the office, when they're sitting here at deadline, waiting for your stories to come in, they're not at the games. They don't feel what you guys feel so much. They don't experience that arena. And they didn't quite get it. And here's what they always hated. They hated whenever I went on the trip with you, whether it be, just walking 2 blocks down there and being there for big games. When I was down there hockey coaching, you know what I always came back? I always came back and said, hey, they're pushing deadline a little bit, but let's have a little mercy. You need to walk a mile in their shoes. And somebody on the desk once said, I wish he'd walk about 100 miles in their shoes and not come back. I always came back more sympathetic, more understanding of what the writers had to go through that was one benefit. Now, I was telling you what I thought we should be writing about. I know that's a pain in the rear a lot of times, but
a lot of times you're right.
Well, a lot of times but I always came back with the perspective of how challenging your jobs were. Not difficult, because difficult's a relative term, but they were challenging. And I appreciate what Barry said about that. The camaraderie of our staff is has made the 13, 14 years I've been here the best, by far the best professional experience of my life. I'm an old guy, I've been around a lot. And I think it's what's attracted other great people to this department. People like Anthony Slater, who is just, he and I go round and round the mulberry bush on stuff, but I got to tell you, he's the same today, tomorrow, the next day. He's the most even-keeled guy there is. And then you have the stoic and always reliable Eric Horn. And if you look at it, Darnell, I was really worried about our Thunder coverage when you moved into your new role. I was very worried about it. And we were doing it in a year that you couldn't really afford.
New coach, Kevin Durant, free agency year. It was a big-time year.
And I wasn't the only one worried about it. But the fundamentals, the fact that you had moved into a new role and still were there as a resource for these guys, and the quality of these guys, and the fact that Barry and Jenny, who I wish was here so I could sing her praises, that's the continuity stays. And the continuity is the success of it. Nobody covers an NBA team like you guys cover an NBA team.
Well, thanks, Mike. A lot of credit goes to you because in the 10 years that the NBA has been in town, you were, along with a couple of others, Ed Kelly you mentioned earlier, a visionary on how we should cover it. And you could have easily taken the easy way out and had a Stringer or the New Orleans or the Times-Picayune cover the New Orleans/Oklahoma City Hornets for us. But you had a vision, and you stuck to your guns, and it's largely a credit to you that our coverage is what it is. And I know you've taken some hits publicly for various things.
Various things,
but I think it's important for people to understand that our coverage has a lot to do with our leadership. And thank you to you for everything that you've done, not only for me, but for our entire staff in shaping our coverage, not just with the NBA, the Thunder, the Hornets, but with OU, OSU, Preps. You got great ideas, enthusiasm that I wish sometimes wasn't always there, but it sort of makes us who we are, it makes you who you are. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm gonna pull Barry into this real quick and just say, I wish, we're not. I've got Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook here, and you can decide who. But with our team, we had a real threesome. We had the big three. It was more like Bosh, LeBron, and D Wade, and by that I mean Jenny. I mean, really and truly. There's nobody. When Bill Platsky came by, Barry, do you remember this? Bill Platsky held up the Oklahoman and said, "This is the way newspapers used to be. There's nobody doing it like this anymore." He did it for us in the press room, one of the Lakers series, I think it was, when he came down. Might have been the Clippers. I can't remember. But Bill paid us that compliment. And what I mean is, from the start, every time the NBA and OKC, there's now three. Used to be four of us. You know, sort of on the beat, sitting in the meeting rooms talking about what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. But the three that remain, Darnell, you, Barry, and Jenny Carlson. And everybody had a great role to play. Barry, I knew how much Barry's encyclopedic knowledge of OU football and college football and the NFL and baseball, at least, you know, he doesn't like to admit that anymore, but he's a baseball nut who I don't know, the game is dead to him, I realize now, but I never realized how much about the NBA Barry knew. I never realized how much about the NBA you loved and how that conveyed. But with Jenny, her love of a great story and her ability to get people to talk to her and peel out their stories, that's a real, you know, that's what made people like us. No matter what, if you were writing something critical of the team or Barry was saying how things should be, Jenny was always the person coming in and humanizing the team, the fans, everything about this, that say no matter what, she humanized the NBA and OKC to all of us. So I want to make sure those three ingredients, they were there at the beginning, they're here now, and they'll be here long after I'm gone. I surfed in your wake. I threw a couple ideas on, you know, and we argued. I made meetings longer. Has anybody talked about how long the meetings are going to be once I'm gone?
No, they've talked about how short they're going to be.
I think we had our first one. What was that, the other day?
Yeah.
It was probably half the time. And
Well, it got crashed in the middle of it.
yeah.
But, yeah, it's been discussed.
You know, I'm not
Not
sure.
by me. I did not broach the subject. Others, let's
Thanks.
say.
I'm not sure this is the podcast that Lackmeyer was looking for. I'm not sure that we covered all the stuff. We had stuff. There's a certain headline that we didn't talk about. Probably
Good for us.
Good for us. You guys carried the brunt of that too in the community, and in the league and all that stuff. And we weathered the storm. Weathered the storm in large part because of the people you guys are. But I believe the city loves this team. The city's interest and or the state's avid interest in this team. You guys matched it. You put out fresh roles and fresh information, and it kind of rode the information. I mean, remember we did podcast. We did the Press Row podcast. We started doing video. Darnell, your blogs. I once came up to Barry Tramel and said, "Hey, what if you would post a blog like Bill Simmons? Like, what if you kind of did a Bill Simmons blog? Like once a week, you would just explore things, just whatever you're thinking about." Barry said, "Yeah, I think I can do that. How about if I do it 3 times a day?"
You're condensing the story. That didn't happen overnight. That morphed over a period of years. But I appreciate the sentiment.
It was you buried Bill Simmons. Darnell, your notes on the scorecard, or nuggets in my notebook.
Yep,
Sorry,
yep.
notes on the scorecard was Alan Malamud, wasn't it?
Yeah, from the Los Angeles
From Los
Times.
Angeles Times. That shows you how old I am. But your nuggets in my notebook, they were the things that people stayed up at night, hitting refresh on their browser after a big game, waiting to see. You were the standard setter for that. It's something that Anthony and Eric are continuing. So I'm glad we got to do this podcast so I could give credit where credit's due.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Mike. The next 10 years to me are going to be really, really interesting. You know, we talked about the first 10 years in the NBA or NBA and OKC. The next 10 years of the NBA and OKC are going to be really interesting. And I'd like it if we could do this again 10 years from now and look back on what these next 10 years are going to be like, because everyone talked about the honeymoon. And I think we're coming out of this honeymoon phase now with Kevin Durant gone, Russell Westbrook probably, not much longer for Oklahoma City. I hope so. I think it's great for the city, but it's a different era now that Kevin Durant's gone. And I think these next 10 years are going to be really, really interesting in OKC in terms of the NBA.
Sam Presti had always talked about this day. You know, in a lot of our conversations, he would say things. I mean, and these guys are going to the Western Conference Finals 4 out of 6 times, and we'd be in these conversations. He was saying, "We're building a team. The cement's not wet." Remember, he would say things like that.
Yeah.
And
Cement's not dry.
Cement's not dry. Boy, I'm just, this is the kind of stuff you're going to miss. Barry making fun of me at the meetings or all my malaprops. But anyway, the cement. I don't know what texture the cement is. I think they got to pour another layer of concrete. Yeah. But the foundation of the team, the love of the team, this is now when you find out with all those things, did they work? And it's a different level of coverage. And it started today. You know, the tone of the coverage really has turned in the last couple of days. And Barry's column today was along that lines. People elsewhere have seen superstars come and go. And it's like Chicken Little stuff. The sky is falling. Barry sort of provided an objective, said it's still got the roster. Now, Westbrook is not here. Barry, you get the last word.
Don't trade Russell Westbrook. That's my last word. The difference between winning 39 games and 29 games doesn't mean much to me. However, if you want me to talk about the NBA in Oklahoma City, it's been a blessing to everybody. It's been a blessing to all our lives, fans, media, business people, anybody you can think of. And it's been a great fun and great ride. And we'd have muddled through it without you, boss, but you made it. You made it fun, and you made it great, and you kept us on track. And the truth of the matter is, the Daily Oklahoman Sports Department is on the map nationally, not because of college football, which we've been covering in a big-time way for all these decades, but because of the way we cover the NBA. And people all over America know that and realize that and respect us for that. And you're the biggest reason for that. So thank you.
I think Gabe Kelly was the biggest reason because he gave me an assignment. He gave me that assignment, and all we did was try to fulfill it. But I'm Scott Brooks. See, that's who I am. I'm Scott Brooks. I had good ball players.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Pull-up jumper off the rim and in. Oh! And the Thunder win! All right, come on, let's sing the Thunder song. All right. When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your thunder buddy and say these magic words.